Shout out to John King for what I'm about to talk about here. Shout out to him. And I love that these characters here are the ones speaking, even though it's the actors that actually speak about it. Very subtle by John King. And he basically says this: Whedon didn't ruin Justice League. And then you look at the quotations from the actors. I don't necessarily agree with this statement below here, because I don't believe he was following orders. Zack Snyder wasn't giving him any orders, any marching orders. Whedon understood the kind of film that Zack was doing. He was working with Zack, and so he was following along the lines of Zack. Yes, he was trying to emulate some things that Zack did. And of course, I don't think he was following orders from Warner Brothers. It was understood that Zack had to make a 2-hour long film. 2 hours and something. This was an agreement Zack seemed to have had with Warner Brothers the second go around. So I don't think he's following orders from Warner Brothers about runtime. That was already an agreement established by the previous director and Warner Brothers. Nonetheless, I love this. Ray Fisher. He says, Joss is a great guy, and Zack picked a great guy to finish for him. And what's cool about this is Ray Fisher is looking like Victor Stone here. He's in the character of Victor Stone at this point in time, which is really cool. Zack was doing a much lighter, more comedic, almost more Whedon-y thing. That's what Ezra Miller said, and you can see here, he's in the character of Barry Allen. Joss walked a very fine line between Zack's sensibility, tone, and direction. This is Ben Affleck, of course, as Bruce Wayne there. And he was Zack's guy and knew exactly what he wanted to get. Gal Gadot as Diana Prince. Really cool. The 4 actors are giving you facts, and yet you go against it. Why? Now this is for the DCEU so-called Snyder fans, so-called DCEU fans. They clearly are not. Because, as I said before, there's a multitude of evidence that goes against what they're saying. People are doing as if, oh, this was going to be a 3-hour-long Zack Snyder bonanza. It was never going to be 3 hours long. Never. Stuff was going to have to be cut from it. We saw what Zack tried to cut BVS, what happened. So why do you think he would have done a better job with Justice League? You're blaming Joss Whedon for cutting out things because he had to cut out things and make sure that the story was going because he had a certain runtime in mind, which Zack had a certain runtime in mind because the executive decision was for a certain runtime. Because almost all comic book movies now have a certain runtime. And this is a part of a comic book universe. Wonder Woman had a runtime of 2 hours and, a couple minutes? Suicide Squad had a runtime of 2 hours and a couple minutes? Why does Zack have to do a 3-hour cut? Make this make sense. You see, every inch of common sense tells us that this is not only a Zack's film, but that Joss Whedon did an excellent job at getting the film down to a format which was enjoyable, just enough, and he didn't go overboard with anything. While the CGI had some bits and pieces to be desired, you can't get everything. Okay? Here's the other thing that really gets me. Thor Ragnarok and The Last Jedi. The common consensus out there is they are inferior movies to Justice League. Inferior. So why is Justice League doing less than them at the box office? If it was an enjoyable film, if it was a short film, those are not bad things. It tells me you want more. So why is it that you're not supporting the film? Why are you going the negative route, using negative energies to boycott a film that not only is more enjoyable and was more enjoyable than Thor Ragnarok and The Last Jedi, but it's a film that's superior to them, according to you, the same people. Well, it's not as great a film as it should have been with Zack at the helm. How do you know that? How do you know Zack would have gotten the runtime that was necessary to make this film better than it already is. We already know Joss Whedon. He's very good at dynamics between characters, relationships. And we can tell he spruced up certain parts of the film. What's to make you think that Zack would have done a better job at that? I'm not saying he wouldn't have. But what's to make you think that? You're coming from a perspective of assumption. A lot of assumptions. You assume a lot of things. You assume this would have been a 3-hour cut, which it wouldn't have been. You assume 40 minutes were cut out of the movie, or an hour, or 2 hours. That's not true. There are no facts to support that. You assume that Joss Whedon got $100 million. I heard some people say he got $100 million to do reshoots. There's no facts supporting that. The movie was a $250 million film, and $275 million film, and what was been reported is it was a $300 million film, which means only $25 million was used in reshoots. And that's typical of reshoots. At the end of the day, how much new script was introduced into this movie? Just go, check your B-roll footage, check the trailers. You'll realize very, very minimal new script was introduced to this movie. There was a lot of reenactment of script that was there already, but no new script per se. How the movie was arranged, the order in which it was running, we saw from concept art that this movie had to maintain its storyboard, how it was arranged in its storyboard. My point being this. Essentially, you got a Zack Snyder movie as Zack Snyder would direct it. Not completely, because obviously Joss Whedon does his Joss Whedon things, and he was the guy that actually cut it in post-production. But having said that, this is essentially a Zack Snyder film. Because Zack Snyder's themes are all in it. That's why I said it's 100% his vision. I'm not talking about his project. It's not 100% his project, obviously. But obviously, it's 100% his vision you're looking at. This is where Zack wanted the characters to end up being. Not exactly the way how they ended up being, but this is where he was going. This is what Warner Bros. Wanted him to do. He wanted Zack Snyder to get you to the point where you see the characters you recognize and know and love. And that's what Zack Snyder's journey, that was the whole point behind the trilogy, to give you a background to these characters, to give you some more oomph to them. That's the whole point of what Zack was doing. So it's just strange to me that at the end of all of this, people are saying, well, Whedon hacked up Zack's vision. He didn't hurt it for certain. And he definitely endorsed it. He was pushing it. Of course, he did it in his way. If it was Zack to do it, I'm sure it would have been done with a lot more complexity and elaboration to it. That I give Zack. Zack's good at that. So, Whedon has his strong points and Zack has his strong points. And that's what you saw in this film. And I told you, I got to take out my belt and spank some of you, because some of you are not focused on the substance of a movie. You're focused on everything else but what the movie was trying to say. And Zack is very strong on what he's trying to say. The whole point you missed. And that's why I have to take out my spanking belt and beat you. Because Whedon didn't ruin Justice League. You did. You, the fan. Talking about how all these negative things about Warner Bros. And Whedon hacked to death Zack's vision. They didn't hack to death Zack's vision. Yeah, there's some things in the trailers you didn't see in the movie. You didn't see much of Ray Fisher's character as Victor Stone. No, you didn't see it. And I know Zack's son did a lot of work with the Victor Stone character. I understand. But you saw pictures of it, and that was enough for the story. You got to cut things out of a movie. And this movie is the Justice League. when I saw the extended cut for Suicide Squad, and all these people were talking about, it wasn't a superior cut to the theatrical cut. It had some things that were interesting, but it didn't. The stuff that was cut out of Suicide Squad was not important to the story of Suicide Squad. When we look at BVS and the stuff that was cut out of BVS, yes, some of it gave some explanation for why Superman, for instance, couldn't see the bomb, etc. These are minor things, but nonetheless, for other people, it was a big deal. But at the end of the day, when I looked at BVS, the theatrical cut, I said it was solid. The masterpiece is the ultimate cut, no doubt about it. I don't think it's night and day. But at the same time, I do agree that it did add and fill out the story. But the story's there. It's the same story. And I know this is the same story, which is what Zack's vision is. It's the story. It's not all the particulars and details, but it's the story. And he has a lot of particulars and details in there. It's the story that's been preserved. And here, the same thing with Joss Whedon. Zack's story is preserved. And the tone of the movie is also preserved. This movie has the same tone. It's a very serious tone throughout it. And even though the story lightens up coming down to the end, they're not a bunch of jokes and people hee-hee-ha-ing and trash-talking each other. There's none of that. And Whedon wanted to do that in the beginning of the film with the robber and Batman. Not to say that it would have been, I believe Whedon would have done an excellent job with it, but I think the tone, Warner Brothers wanted the tone to be a certain way. And they were very well, again, very good judgment on their part. Because it kept a serious tone. For the first hour of this movie, it was quite a serious tone. And then in the second half of the movie, there was a little bit of ease up on the serious tone because we had a little comedy, situational comedy in between with the little girl with the bug spray and with the Flash throwing in a joke here or a joke there. Mostly the Flash. You would see that it was a little bit lighter, but the seriousness of having to face Steppenwolf and the cost and seeing Steppenwolf killing people and all of this stuff, it wasn't cool. It was a serious tone movie with matters of humor in it, and Henry Cavill said that. It's not a comedy. I challenge anyone out there. Name me a better movie than Justice League this year. Logan doesn't cover what Justice League covers. Wonder Woman, while it's a fantastic movie, is limited to Wonder Woman and Back in the Day. This movie brings to a closure what she is and wraps her story into a full circle. No other movie does that, not even BVS. So that makes it superior to Wonder Woman. Spider-Man Homecoming got a lot of praise and stuff, and people was defending it and all of that. Spider-Man Homecoming, in terms of story, it's not better than this movie in any way, shape, or form. Let's forget Thor Ragnarok. Dismiss that. Star Wars: The Last Jedi. I can't even say The Last Jedi. The Force Awakens I always want to think about. I heard, I don't know, people are saying it pales in comparison to Justice League. Some people say it's greater than Justice League, but they are very few in number. It doesn't matter. It's just common opinion, right? So really, what is the best movie of this year? I argue Justice League when it comes to comic book movies. And it was a fusing of two different directors with the same goal. And so I've gone publicly on Twitter and thanked Joss Whedon for finishing this project, because if this project was finished next year, it wouldn't be relevant to the current political, social, economic, and spiritual environment we're in right now. Would not be relevant. Zack made the right call. And he chose the right guy to finish the vision for him. And the tone and just the way how the movie ended reminded me of Justice League Unlimited, Justice League 2001. And it ties in so nicely. But the thing I admire about this movie is it symbolizes the coming together. The coming together for the better good. That's what I love about it. It literally symbolizes that. In the face of darkness, in the face of attacks, something beautiful sometimes is not appreciated. And that's the beautiful thing about Zack Snyder's movies I love. I love the fact that being hopeful doesn't mean that things work out well. And people won't attack you and hate you for being hopeful and doing something special. And only when it's gone do people appreciate it. But they beg for your downfall while it's happening. I remember Lex Luthor putting out those rumors. And people who had an issue with Superman because of something they thought and blamed him for, they attacked him and they said, no hope, no hope. And they had him on a stick burning, a figure of him burning. And I thought, this is exactly what they're doing with this film. And they think they're doing this in the name of Zack Snyder, and they're not. Because it's his film. They're trashing. Then asking for a cut? Why would you ask for a cut when you don't even appreciate what the guy was doing in the cut that you saw in theaters? Now, a real fan of Zack Snyder would be like, man, this was great. But man, I can't wait to see Zack really I just want to see a director's cut of this, where Zack completes this project and really puts out something. Because if this was that good, man, I can't wait for Zack to do his thing. A real fan does that. A real fan supports this movie because they feel like, man, God, I would love to see what Zack's vision would have been. A real fan doesn't tear down something to build up something else. And especially based off of lies. And so I'm so glad that John King is putting these things out. He's my partner in crime. You know, because he's got a lot to offer. See, John and me, we don't see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. But when it comes to the DCEU, we generally do. And my point is this. It's about coming together. And we are now showing you it is possible. On that note, you guys have a great one.